Most players don't quit games because they're bad. I know that sounds like a hot take, but think about it. If a game is truly bad, you usually know within the first 10 minutes and you bounce. That's not churn, that's rejection. The real danger, the thing that kills studios, is when players quit a game that they actually like. They leave because something quietly stopped feeling worth it, and this usually doesn't happen on day one. It usually happens somewhere between day 7 and day 30, when the novelty wears off and the game has to justify its place in its player's routine. It's a huge distinction because churn is rarely dramatic. It's not a rage quit. It's not some viral "I'm deleting this game" on Reddit post. Most of the time it's silent. It's the quiet decision not to open that same game tomorrow, and that's why churn is so hard to spot. Players almost never tell you why they leave. They don't send their feedback. They don't complain. They just disappear. By the time you notice them in your D30 numbers, the decision was already made weeks earlier. Before we dive into how the biggest games in the world deal with this, do me a quick favor. If you're interested in hearing the why behind game design, hit that like and follow Player Driven. It really helps us doing these deep dives and helps us share these best practices and how these studios deal with these things. Let's start by talking about one of the biggest live service games in the world, Fortnite. Where we talk about this, and we often talk about it a lot on Player Driven Live. Check it out on Thursdays at 1 Eastern, our weekly show where we talk about the intersection of community and data. We talk about Fortnite all the time. It's the gold standard for live service games. It's got a huge audience, constant updates all the time, and massive cultural gravity. And yet Fortnite experiences churn. And it's not a sign that it's failure. It's reality. Even the best games in the world see players drift in and out between day 7 and day 30. Not because the game is broken, but because the value of returning dips. When a season doesn't quite land, or the map changes feel flat, or progression just stops feeling exciting, players don't uninstall, they just stop logging in as often. What's interesting is you can actually see these cycles. If you take a look at the last season with The Simpsons, it had a big spike, it started to become really strong, and players started to dip as the season went on, and it's kind of a continuous flow. Big spikes, strong D1, decent D7. Then things get quieter. Not bad, just less compelling. And in that D7 to D30 window, the three pillars of churn start to really take hold. Confusion. The systems pile up, there's new currency, there's new modes, there's new mechanics, there's new progression paths, there's a ton of stuff, and the players don't really know what their North Star is anymore because a whole bunch of stuff is thrown at you and it kind of changes how the game feels. Momentum dies. Confusion doesn't kill D1, it kills D7. Frustration. The effort to reward ratio breaks. If the battle pass starts to feel like a second job, players stop clocking in. Frustration rarely causes an instant quit. It causes missed sessions, and missed sessions turn into churn. Boredom. Boredom doesn't mean a lack of content. Fortnite always has content. Boredom is a lack of novelty. When matches start to feel predictable, when the loop starts evolving, the player's brain checks out. And Fortnite actually does a really good job at this with their bots. Bots help fill out a match, and if you have trouble doing well, bots become these easy targets that you can take down and then start scoring on these games. But the problem is these bots also start to become predictable and too easy, and it's just balance that you got to check out that's really fascinating. And to Fortnite's credit, this is where they respond. They always put out new modes. They put in unexpected collaborations, big swings. Sometimes they work, and sometimes they don't. But what's important is they treat churn as feedback, not failure. Next, let's take a look at World of Warcraft. If Fortnite shows us mid-cycle churn, World of Warcraft shows us the long game. WoW has survived for over 20 years, but its biggest enemy has never been its competitors, it's been churn. In MMOs, churn is contagious. If one person in a guild stops logging in around D30 or D60, the social fabric starts to fray. Suddenly the remaining players lose their anchor. The game didn't change for them, but the environment did. And for years, Blizzard tried to fix churn by adding more stuff, more systems, more mechanics, more resets. But that actually made churn worse. Why? Because it created confusion and fatigue. Players felt like their effort didn't matter because everything would reset their next expansion. Progression stopped feeling permanent. That's a D30 plus retention killer. Eventually, Blizzard shifted their mindset. They simplified the talent trees, they introduced warbands, they respected players' time. And more importantly, they embraced a key idea. It's okay for players to leave, as long as the game feels warm when they return. That's long-term retention thinking. Here's the part that most teams miss. Most players don't churn angrily, they churn silently. By the time churn shows up in your dashboards, it's not a new problem. It's something that broke quietly between D7 and D30. Remember, that's day 7 and day 30 of that user playing that game. Nothing exploded yesterday. Something just stopped feeling worth it weeks ago. Fortnite and WoW aren't successful because players never leave. They're successful because the games they built earn players returns, and they listen to that silence. Retention and churn aren't opposites. They're two sides of the same signal. Retention tells you who stayed, and churn tells you who you need to become. If you want to go deeper into how data meets creativity or how communities act, check out Player Driven at playerdriven.io. We talk to people who are in the trenches, building these systems, building these processes every day. The links are in the description. And before you go, I'm really curious. What was the last game you walked away from? Not because you hated it, but because it stopped feeling worth it to you. Drop it in the comments, and I'll see you in the next one.